Global warming and climate change is real, and it is happening at an alarming rate, whether or not you accept it. The polar caps are melting slowly, faster than we can imagine. But let's take this one step further. What if the world's ice melted overnight? Well, it is safe to say that the Earth would be in total chaos, and that's just putting it lightly. A change in one of the natural ecosystems in the world is bound to shake the planet to its core, and we mean that quite literally. Currently, there are 5 million cubic miles of ice on Earth. If it all melted overnight, it would be nothing short of an apocalypse. For one, sea levels would rise by almost 216 feet above sea level. What does this mean for the continents? Well, most of the continents would be at least partially submerged in water. Paraguay and Buenos Aires in South America would be completely underwater, as would New York, London, Amsterdam, and Shanghai. Miami, Venice, and the Netherlands would be completely washed out. The Hollywood sign on Mount Lee in Los Angeles, underwater. Florida, gone. Asian cities like Mumbai, Beijing, and Tokyo would also be underwater. Australia would be one of the hardest places to be hit, as around 80% of its population stays near the coastline. Antarctica would become an island, developing into a new landmass that would probably be inhabitable. Not many parts of Africa would face the problem of being submerged, but the rising heat on Earth would eventually make this continent uninhabitable. Do you imagine that the entire humanity would be washed out? Okay, maybe not all of it, but those that are left won't be in a pleasant space anyway. Melted ice would release carbon dioxide into the air. Ice needs a lot of carbon dioxide to melt in the first place, but given that the oxygen levels wouldn't be increasing, you will start choking as you breathe the air. About 40% of the Earth's population lives within 100 kilometers of the coastline, so a quick surge in sea levels would submerge many of the coastal cities, killing a vast amount of people. Those who aren't killed would obviously need to relocate to other safer places like Canada, Alaska, the Arctic, or even the remaining parts of the Antarctic. Such a large number of refugees in foreign countries for basic needs like food, clothing, and shelter could cause a lot of stress on the natural resources remaining in those regions. This global migration would lead to further problems, a decrease in human food, and fights for the most basic necessities. No government would be able to handle this massive migration. This would lead to total anarchy, destruction, and warfare. The economy would collapse, wars would be inevitable as countries or communities turned on each other to secure their resources. Not just humans, but animals too would face a lot of problems. Most animals on land and in the polar regions would become extinct, as would many marine species. Why the marine species? Well, the ice caps melting into oceans would cause a major change in currents under the ocean all over the world, killing a lot of marine life as well. The average temperature would rise to around 26 degrees Celsius, which as of now is 14.4 degrees Celsius. Melting ice would change the way the jet stream moves around the world. England would get rainier, and North American winters would get colder and snowier. The problems are not going to surface just above the ground. As ice caps melt into the ocean, the rising salt water will eventually infiltrate groundwater reserves farther inland. Because of the rise in sea levels, the salt water will be forced into the freshwater aquifers, which provide us with a supply of drinking water, irrigation systems, and power plant cooling systems. Talking about the fresh water, the ice on Greenland and Antarctica is made of fresh water. If this ice were to melt into the ocean, that is around 69% of the world's supply of fresh water mixing with salty oceans. This will cause disturbances in the weather and currents. For example, the Gulf Stream brings warm air to northern Europe because of the salty water in the Arctic, but a surge of fresh water mixing with the ocean would dilute the current or even stop it completely. The thermal line circulation could be affected. Known as the Great Conveyor Belt, this moves heat around from the equator to higher latitudes. Without the warm air, temperatures in Europe could decrease to a level that could even create a small-scale ice age in the continent. Out of the last 1% of freshwater ice that is not in Greenland or Antarctica, some of it is in the Himalayan glaciers. The Himalayan glaciers pose one of the largest threats to humankind, because what's trapped inside these glaciers are toxic chemicals like DDT. During the Cold War, there was a military base in northern Greenland called Camp Sentry, which dumped chemicals and radioactive material in the region and left the base. These glaciers have been storing these chemicals for ages, but if they thaw, they release chemicals into the air, rivers, lakes, and other bodies of water, poisoning every single one of them. Now, there is still a bit of that 1% fresh water left, and it is under the ground, mostly in the Arctic tundra, in the form of permafrost. But what is permafrost? Well, it is an organic matter that has been frozen underground for more than 2 years. And how does this permafrost pose a problem? Well, it is estimated 15 million gallons of mercury stored in the Arctic permafrost, as this amount of mercury is almost equal to the amount everywhere else on the planet. So the number one problem from permafrost would be mercury poisoning. Secondly, microorganisms feed on the organic matter in the permafrost. After they digest it, these microorganisms fart out carbon dioxide and methane, two of the most potent greenhouse gases. This could double the level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere currently, and in turn cause a rise in global temperatures by 3.5 degrees Celsius. And if that were to happen, the European Ice Age would not happen, but even the rivers, lakes, and all over the world would evaporate, resulting in droughts and deserts. All of this extra water vapor would lead to a lot more rain, storms, hurricanes, and floods of huge intensities. As more water would cover the surface of the Earth, storms will become even more powerful. When you look at the gas giants in the solar system, they have storms that could cover continents on Earth. One of the reasons that storms never die there is that there are no landforms there, which is why they don't expect turbulence, as a result of which they expand and grow larger. These storms could become a possibility on Earth if the ice were to melt. Add in the mix of the greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and we've got a full-blown catastrophe. The large-scale climate change will alter the seasonal rainfall, making fertile land infertile and unfit for agriculture. Add this to the already persisting problem of food scarcity in the world. With a shift in the tectonic plates, there would be a lot more disturbances in the plates, resulting in fault lines. There would be a lot more earthquakes, and even the smallest earthquake could cause massive destruction. Earthquakes in the volcanic areas could cause volcanoes to erupt more often, potentially resulting in volcanic destruction of the nearby regions. An earthquake along a coast would also result in huge tsunamis, destroying the nearby regions. These tsunamis would be huge because they would be happening 216 feet above the current sea level. If the ice caps melt, believe it or not, it will affect the rotation of the Earth as well. How? Well, if the melted ice caps flow into the ocean, there will be a net movement of mass. The global sea level would rise, resulting in the Earth rotating more slowly. The length of the day will become longer by 2 milliseconds than it currently is, before being 10 to 20 seconds longer a day. Now, luckily, none of this is real. But isn't it though? Just because this situation is hypothetical doesn't mean it isn't happening. Yes, you heard that right. The entire ice on Earth will not melt overnight, but it is still melting, and at a speed faster than we can afford. Scientists say that even a 1 degree Celsius increase in temperature could make the effects of climate change today irreversible. In 2015, NASA revealed that the Earth's oceans are rising faster than expected, and that we are now locked in to at least 90 centimeters of sea level rise in the coming decades. This is enough to displace millions of people around the world. Even if we start taking precautions in the coming years, more than a third of the world's remaining glaciers will melt before the year 2100. 95% of the oldest ice in the Arctic is already gone. Scientists estimate that it could take up to 5,000 years for all the ice on Earth to disappear, but it might be a quicker process if we are not careful. As it is, the ice on Earth is melting at a rapid rate, and the effects are therefore all there to see. Fisheries have collapsed into the Gulf of Maine. Storms and hurricanes have already become more destructive. Coastal communities are facing problems due to constant flooding. People are losing their homes, but so are the animals. In the Arctic, animals like walruses and polar bears are facing extinction because the ice is melting. Seasons have been affected. Temperatures are increasing every year. Climate change is very real, and it is happening right now, and if we are not careful, it won't be long before all of this turns into a reality. In an attempt to put an end to climate change, a legally binding international tractate was signed by 196 parties at COP21 in Paris on December 12, 2015. This was named the Paris Agreement, and it came into force on November 4, 2016. The goal is to limit global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius. To reach this goal, countries aim at reducing greenhouse gas emissions and reducing the global climate temperature by mid-century. One of the biggest factors affecting the high level of gas emissions is the constant burning of fossil fuels, slowly resulting in global warming. If we continue adding carbon to the atmosphere at this rate, we will be facing the drastic consequences of global warming much sooner. So, how was it knowing what would happen if the world's ice melted overnight? Pretty scary, isn't it? What are you doing to save our planet? What should we all do as a community? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, like and share. Subscribe to our channel for more such content.